Evangelio según San Marcos y vamos a leer en el capítulo 6 bajo la bendición del Padre y del Hijo y del Espíritu Santo de Dios.
Amén. Mark chapter 6 verse 1 under the name of the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Salió Jesús de allí y vino a su tierra y le seguían sus discípulos. Y llegado el día de reposo, comenzó a enseñar en la sinagoga y muchos oyéndole se admiraban y decían: ¿de dónde tiene estas cosas? ¿Y qué sabiduría es esta que le es dada? ¿Y estos milagros que por sus manos son hechos? ¿No es este el carpintero, hijo de María, hermano de Jacobo, de José, de Judas y de Simón? ¿No están también aquí con nosotros sus hermanas? Y se escandalizaban de él.
Then he went out from there and came to his own country, and his disciples followed him. And when the Sabbath had come, he began to teach in the synagogue. And many hearing him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? And what wisdom is this which is given to him, that such mighty works are performed by his hands? Is this not the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us?" So they were offended at him.
Versos 4, 5 y 6. Mas Jesús les decía: no hay profeta sin honra, sino en su propia tierra y entre sus parientes y en su casa. Y no pudo hacer allí ningún milagro, salvo que sanó a unos pocos enfermos, poniendo sobre ellos las manos. Y estaba asombrado de la incredulidad de ellos, y recorría las aldeas de alrededor enseñando.
But Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own country, among his own relatives, and in his own house." Now he could do no mighty work there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. And he went about the villages in a circuit, teaching.
Damos gracias al Señor. Amén.
Amén.
Tomar asiento.
Gloria a Dios.
Probablemente, mi hermano, usted tiene un concepto claro de lo que se acaba de leer.
You probably have a clear concept of what was just read.
Pero nosotros hoy vamos a entrar en la vida normal de Jesús.
But today we're going to touch base on the normal life of Jesus.
No lo vamos a ver por un momento como el Salvador del mundo, sino como el carpintero.
We're not going to see him in this moment as the Savior of the world, but instead as the carpenter.
Como el hombre que creció en Nazaret, desde muchacho hasta llegar a su edad de 33 años más o menos.
As this person, this man who grew up in Nazareth all the way up until his adult life.
El común de la gente lo veía como el hijo de José, el hijo de María.
The common person saw him as son of Mary and Joseph.
¿Quién sabe cuántos de los que Jesús estaba teniendo al frente allí en la sinagoga le habían pagado algunos denarios por haberle hecho una puerta o una ventana o algo de eso?
Who knows how many of the people that were sitting there listening to him or were in the synagogue with him or wherever, how many of them had paid him for a job that he had done as a carpenter?
Probablemente muchos de ellos le habían ofrecido una copa de vino o a lo mejor un vaso con agua o una comida. Habría estado en la mayoría de los hogares allí haciendo trabajo de carpintería.
And many of them probably offered him maybe a cup of wine, a cup of water, maybe a plate of food. But the point was that he found himself in their homes doing different carpentry jobs.
Probablemente la gente allí en Nazaret conocía muy bien la casa de Jesús y lo habrían visto allí con sus mangas arremangadas y serruchando y trabajando con la carropa y el cepillo y haciendo cuestiones de carpintería.
And the thing was that the majority of these people, if not all of them, probably knew exactly where Jesus lived, and they had seen him working with his sleeves rolled up and doing whatever it was that he was doing working.
Habrían visto crecer las hermanas del Señor Jesús y los hermanos de Jesús.
They'd seen his siblings grow up.
Probablemente veían a Jesús como el hermano mayor que se encargó de la crianza de sus hermanos una vez que José, el marido de María, murió.
And they probably also saw Jesus as the eldest brother who took care of his siblings and raised them up once Joseph had passed.
Ese era el Jesús que veía esa gente.
That was the Jesus that these people were used to seeing.
Probablemente y sin lugar a dudas Jesús iba todos los sábados a la sinagoga,
And without a doubt, Jesus went every single Saturday to the synagogue.
pero nunca tomó la iniciativa de ser el que predicaba o el que llevaba alguna enseñanza, nada. Estaba esperando su momento.
But he never forced himself to be the one that was preaching or teaching. He was waiting for his moment.
Muchas veces los hermanos del Señor Jesús que sabían, porque probablemente Jesús oraba por algunos de ellos y eran sanados, y ellos sabían, y por los relatos de su señora madre, sabían perfectamente bien quién era Jesús.
And I can imagine that his siblings knew exactly who he was, because most likely at some point they got sick and Jesus prayed over them and healed them, or even just from the storytelling of their mother of how Jesus was conceived.
¿Quién sabe cuántas veces tuvieron encontronazo con Jesús?
Or maybe they had a little bit of a bickering moment with Jesus.
Que no querían hacer esto o aquello, y a lo mejor el Señor pues lo jalaba el botón.
Maybe the younger siblings didn't want to do this or that, but Jesus, told them, you got to do it.
¿Quién sabe cuánto los llamó? Mira, ayúdame a levantar esto, ayúdame a qué. Pues Jesús era un ser humano tan igual a usted y a mí.
Or maybe at some point he asked his siblings, hey, listen, I need your help lifting this thing, it's too heavy. Because again, Jesus was a common person, he was a man.
La diferencia entre Jesús y usted y yo es que Jesús era engendrado por el Espíritu Santo. Nosotros somos engendrados de voluntad de varón en nuestras madres.
The only true difference between you and us and Jesus is that Jesus came to be by the will of God through the Holy Spirit, whereas you and I, we came from the will of man and woman.
¿Quién sabe cuántas veces Jesús participó de fiestas contra esa gente?
And I don't know how many times Jesus probably participated in some sort of celebration with his neighbors.
Una vez que Jesús sale al ministerio
Once Jesus enters his ministry
y empieza a manifestarse la gloria de Dios en él,
and the glory of God the Father starts manifesting in him,
una vez que él es bautizado por Juan el Bautista en las aguas del Jordán,
and once he's baptized by John the Baptist,
Jesús se retira 40 días al desierto,
Jesus goes into his 40 days fast into the desert.
luego regresa a Nazaret y de Nazaret sale a Caná de Galilea
From there he goes back to Nazareth, and then he goes to Galilee.
y hace su primera presentación en la boda de Caná de Galilea.
And he does almost the first demonstration or presentation in a wedding feast.
Y inicia su ministerio con la conversión del agua en vino.
And he initiates his ministry with the conversion of water to wine.
Y empieza a poner en claro quién es él, y la gente empieza a ver las maravillas y los portentos y los prodigios que está haciendo.
And he starts making it very clear who he is, and that's when people start seeing the signs, the miracles.
De allí baja al mar de Tiberíades, en las orillas del mar, en la barca, continuamente reunía gente y empezaba a predicarle y hablarles del reino de Dios.
And then from there he goes down to Tiberias, and he spends his time along the water side, and he's on the boats, and he's preaching to people.
La gente empezaba a venir y empezaba a ver y a recibir milagros.
And people were watching him, and they wanted to receive, and they started to see the miracles.
Uno de los milagros más grandes que se empezaron a ver es que los demonios salían huyendo de las personas.
One of the first biggest signs that started to show up was that the demons would flee at the mention of his name.
En aquella época había mucha gente con trastornos mentales, muchos enfermos, leprosos, ciegos, mudos, tartamudos, y Jesús empezó a sanar toda esa gente.
At that point in time, people were riddled with all sorts of things, all the way from mental to emotional to physical, being plagued with leprosy, etc. And Jesus started targeting all of those things.
Originalmente contó con unos pocos discípulos,
And at first he started off with just a couple disciples,
que eran discípulos de Juan el Bautista y se vinieron con Jesús.
which were originally disciples to John the Baptist and then switched over to Jesus.
Porque Juan les había dicho, ese es el Cordero de Dios que quita el pecado del mundo.
Because John has said that is the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world.
Este es aquel del que yo decía que detrás mío viene uno del cual yo no soy digno de desatar la trenza de sus zapatos, de sus sandalias.
This is the one that I was talking about, that I am not even worthy of touching his sandals.
Y él dice bien clarito, y este es mayor que yo porque era antes que yo.
And he made it very clear. Even though he's after me, he's still greater than me.
Le dijo a él oír.
And he went on to say, you have to listen to him.
Y le dijo, es necesario que él crezca y yo mengue.
And he also said it's necessary for him to grow and for me to diminish.
Porque Juan había levantado multitudes con su predicación.
Because John had riled up all of these multitudes with his
Pero
teaching.
Juan había dicho bien claro, yo soy la voz de uno que clama en el desierto.
But John had also been very clear, I am just the voice of one who calls out in the middle of the desert.
Y Jesús dijo de Juan, este es el Elías que había de venir, que anunciaría el reino de Dios.
And then Jesus was very clear about John. He said this was the Elijah that was prophesied that would call out the Messiah, that would
Entonces
lead the
estamos
way.
viendo dos personajes diferentes
So we're seeing two different people
en Jesús.
in Jesus.
El Jesús carpintero
The carpenter,
y el Jesús que de repente empieza a hacer milagros.
and then the Jesus that burst out with miracles.
Pero lejos de su sitio donde él se crió.
But away from the place that he was born, that he was
Pero la
raised in.
fama empezó a regarse.
But his fame was spreading.
Jesús iba a Galilea, en el mar de Tibería, de todo esto, para que se cumpliese lo que estaba escrito de él.
And again, Jesus was kind of circling around Galilee, Tiberias, all of this so that the word could be fulfilled.
Pueblo que andaba en tinieblas vio gran luz.
A people that were in darkness saw a great light.
De allí subió a Jerusalén y iba a la fiesta en Jerusalén.
From there he went up to Jerusalem and participated in the celebrations.
Cuando estamos hablando de fiesta, no estamos hablando de bacanales, de bebedera de aguardiente, estamos hablando de la fiesta de Jehová que está instituida y que tenían que cumplirla año tras año.
Now these celebrations weren't parties per se, they were celebrations that were instituted by God to celebrate certain things that he proclaimed, that he prophesied, etc.
Que Jesús estaba identificado con esa fiesta porque todas esas fiestas hablan de él.
And Jesus was identified with all of these celebrations because those celebrations talked about him.
Si usted ve lo que tiene que ver con el Shabbat, Jesús es nuestro descanso, Jesús es nuestra paz.
For example, one of the celebrations that has more or less to do with resting, well, Jesus is our resting spot.
Si ve lo que tiene que ver con el sacrificio del Cordero, Jesús es el Cordero de Dios que quita el pecado del mundo.
Or the celebration that has to do with the sacrifice of a lamb. Jesus is the lamb that was slain for us.
Si tiene que ver con las primicias, Jesús es las primicias.
Or if it has to do with the first fruits, he is the first fruit.
Si tiene que ver con los panes que se presentan, Jesús es la resurrección.
Or if it has to do with the bread that is presented, well, he is the bread of life.
Cuando se presentan los panes sin levadura,
Again, when the unleavened bread are presented.
Jesús dice, yo soy el pan vivo que descendió del cielo.
Jesus talked about himself saying that he is the bread of life that came
Todo
from
eso
heaven.
estaba identificado con Jesús.
All of that had to do
Y
with
Jesús está
Jesus.
identificado con eso.
And Jesus
El
identified
detalle es
himself
que
with
no había
that.
llegado el momento de él.
The thing was that his moment hadn't come
Y
yet.
cuando llega el momento,
So when his time does come,
Jesús ejerce su ministerio con todo poder y autoridad.
Jesus begins to move in authority and power.
Revoluciona todo aquello.
He revolutionizes all of that.
Utilizo la palabra revolución en el aspecto de que remueve todo.
And when I talk about revolution, I'm talking about he's creating a movement, a
Se
shift.
simbraron las bases de la religión.
So in other words, he's shaking the foundation of their
Se
religion.
simbraron las instituciones.
He's shaking their institutions.
La gente empezó a ver la institución matrimonial como algo diferente.
People started seeing the institution of marriage as something different.
Cristo empieza su ministerio justamente con un matrimonio.
Jesus starts his ministry with a wedding, with a marriage.
Empiezan a ver los sacrificios en otra forma.
They start seeing the sacrifices in a different way.
Se había perdido el respeto por el templo, Jesús impone el respeto por el templo.
The respect for the temple had been lost, and he puts it back in its place, basically.
Las fiestas y la gente iba y cumplía, pero no había expectativa.
And people went through with the celebrations, but they weren't expecting anything.
Jesús pone la expectativa.
And yet Jesus comes and he gives an
La
expectation.
gente subía y preguntaba dónde está el que hace los milagros.
And people would come up and say, where is the one that does the miracles?
¿A dónde está el que le dio la vista al ciego?
Where's the one that gave sight to the blind?
Revolucionó la religión.
He revolutionized religion.
El sumo sacerdote y todos los escribas y fariseos andaban atrás de él porque estaban desesperados.
The high priest, the other priests, the Pharisees, all of those other E's, they were after Jesus because of what he was doing.
Nunca se supo de que el sumo sacerdote hiciera ningún milagro de nada.
It's not known that the high priest did a single miracle during his
Y
time.
aparentemente era la representación de Dios en la tierra.
And yet he was quote unquote the representation of God on earth.
Y de repente llega un humilde carpintero y empieza a hacer milagros y prodigios y portentos.
And then all of a sudden these people are seeing a humble carpenter start showing the glory of God.
Se revoluciona todo.
So everything is shifted.
Pero llega un momento en que él tiene que enfrentarse a la verdad.
But there comes a time that he has to face the truth.
¿A qué verdad?
What truth?
La verdad de su casa.
The truth about his home.
Tiene que subir a Nazaret.
He has to go up to Nazareth.
Ahí está su mamá y están sus hermanos y sus hermanas.
That's where his mom is and all of his siblings.
Ahí está su testimonio.
That's where his testimony is.
Y hay expectativa cuando él llega.
And there is a sort of expectation when he arrives.
Y la gente se pregunta, pero bueno, ¿y este no es el carpintero?
And people start asking, is this not the carpenter?
Y alguno diría, sí, él me hizo la ventana de la casa.
And probably somebody said, yeah, he made the window to my house.
Otro diría, sí, él me hizo la puerta y hizo, qué sé yo, el arado y las cosas de carpintería que había que hacer.
Or maybe somebody else said, yeah, he made my door. Or somebody else, maybe he made the cabinets to my kitchen. Whatever it was that he did.
La gente ha llegado a inventar que Jesús fue el que inventó la mesa alta y la silla. Y eso han llegado a inventar.
Some people have even speculated or come up with the story that Jesus was the one that actually made the high top chairs and tables.
Porque originalmente las mesas eran bajitas y ellos se sentaban en el piso y comían recostados a la mesa.
Because at that point in time, it was known that their tables were literally right on the floor and they would sit down and kind
Lo
of
cierto el caso es
lean
que
on
había
it.
expectativa en la sinagoga.
So anyway, they had an expectation for him.
Y cuando Jesús llega,
When Jesus arrives,
empiezan a escucharlo.
they start listening to him.
Dice, bueno, ¿de dónde saca esta sabiduría?
And they start asking, where is he getting this wisdom?
Pero si nosotros lo conocemos, ¿de dónde saca esto?
We know him. Where is he getting
Y
this?
vamos a detenernos aquí.
This is where we're going to pause.
A veces, hermano, en nuestros propios hogares hacemos eso.
Sometimes in our own homes, we do the same thing.
Perdemos dos cosas.
We lose two things.
Lo primero que perdemos es el respeto entre nosotros mismos.
First thing we lose is the respect that we have for one another.
Y tú no es que eres cristiano.
Saying things like, are you not supposed to be a
Oye,
Christian?
para ser cristiano como tú, mejor no soy nada.
I'd rather not be a Christian or anything else if it's like you.
¿De cuándo acá tú y que Dios te llamó?
And since when did God call you?
¿Qué crees tú que esos son sueños frijoleros?
Who do you think you are? Those are made up dreams.
¿Qué va a estar Dios dándote ningún sueño a ti?
God's not going to be giving you any sort of dream.
Entre nosotros mismos nos vituperamos.
Amongst ourselves, we start attacking each other.
No creemos que Dios puede hablarle a nuestra esposa o a nuestros hijos, o nuestros hijos y nuestra esposa no creen que Dios puede hablarnos a nosotros.
We start thinking that God can't talk to us or to whoever through our wives and our children or through our husbands, whoever.
Nos vemos como un masacote de carne,
We see ourselves as kind of like a mix of different
que
needs.
sabe mecánica o que sabe esto, que sabe lo otro, porque lo estudió, porque se ha machucado los dedos.
All we know is that you learned a certain trade because you studied it or something.
Pero no podemos ver la imagen de Cristo en nuestro familiar.
But we can't see the image of Christ in our family member.
¿Por qué no lo podemos hacer?
And why is that?
Porque nuestro familiar tiene defectos.
Because our family member has
Porque
faults.
nosotros tenemos defectos.
Because we have faults.
Porque tenemos 1000 problemas.
Because we've got 1,000
Porque nos
problems.
airamos.
Because we get angry.
Porque a veces decimos lo que no deberíamos de decir.
Because sometimes we speak out of turn.
Y entonces se pierde no solo el respeto,
So then not only do we lose respect,
sino se pierde la fe.
then we also start losing faith.
Eso es lo importante.
That's the important part.
Esa gente respetaba a Jesús como carpintero.
These people respected Jesus as a
Le
carpenter.
reconocían sus capacidades,
They recognized his skill set,
pero no podían ver la parte mística de él, la parte divina de él,
but they couldn't see his divine side
porque ellos no creían.
because they didn't believe.
Sus propios hermanos no creían en él.
His own siblings didn't believe in him.
¿Por qué no creían en él? Vaya usted a saber.
Why they didn't believe, I couldn't tell you.
Cuando nosotros leemos que el Señor dice, no hay, el verso 4, no hay profeta sin honra, sino en su propia tierra y entre sus parientes y en su casa.
Realize what Jesus is saying in verse 4. He says, a prophet is not without honor except in his own country, among his own relatives, and in his own house.
Jesús, que todo lo sabe,
Jesus, who is all-knowing,
sabía perfectamente bien que sus hermanos no creían en él.
knew that his siblings didn't believe in him.
Sabía que su señora madre dudaba.
And he knew that his own mother doubted.
Sabía perfectamente. Vean los discípulos y usted va a encontrar apenas 2 hermanos del Señor y eso al final.
Realize that when you're looking at the list of disciples that were following Jesus, only 2 of them were his brothers, and that was towards the end of his ministry.
Prácticamente ninguno de los familiares del Señor lo siguió.
Basically, none of his relatives followed him.
Y hay un momento en que creen que él está fuera de sí, que está loco y van a rescatarlo.
And there's a point in the story where it says that his siblings, his family thought that he was crazy, and they went to go get him out of wherever he was.
Observe lo que pasó con José y sus hermanos.
Observe what happened with Joseph and his
Dios
brothers.
revelándole a José lo que va a ocurrir.
God is revealing to Joseph what's about to happen.
¿Qué veían sus hermanos en él?
And what were his
El
brothers saying?
protegido de Jacob,
This was the protected one of
el
Jacob.
chismoso,
This was the gossip.
el que Jacob le hacía su chamarra, su cosa, su abrigo bien hechecito.
Not the gossip or the tattletale. This was the one that Jacob was protecting and
¿Qué
gave him
cuesta
his
que Dios le habla a este tripón? Olvídese de eso.
And they were saying, God's not going to be talking to this little one.
Terminaron vendiéndolo.
They ended up selling their brother.
Esa misma situación pasó con Jesús.
Same thing that happened with Jesus.
¿Qué cuento de hijo de Dios? Nada.
They started saying, you're not a son of God.
Terminaron matándolo.
They ended up murdering him.
A veces pasa en nuestros propios hogares.
That's what happens in our homes.
Dios quiere, desea, anhela que usted crezca en gracia.
God desires for you to grow in grace.
Que su hogar sea un manantial de vida.
That your home be a place that life flows out of.
Pero a veces nuestros propios errores hacen que pierdan no solo la confianza y el respeto, sino que se muevan de la fe.
But sometimes our own faults, not only does it make them lose their trust, their confidence, but it also makes them leave their faith.
La gente dice, yo no puedo entender cómo alguien que habla en lenguas haga estas cosas.
And people start saying, I cannot understand how somebody who is speaking in tongues can do this thing here.
Yo no puedo entender cómo alguien que dice que Dios le habla, de repente suelte una palabra rara por ahí.
And I can't understand how somebody who says that God speaks to them all of a sudden has a potty mouth.
Yo no puedo entender cómo alguien que dice ser lavado por la sangre de Cristo y que se ha bautizado y todo eso y hace trampa en los negocios.
And I can't believe that somebody who says that they are washed with the blood of Christ and has been baptized, all of a sudden they're being a trickster in their business.
La gente termina hablando mal y pierde la fe y la esperanza.
People start talking bad about this person and they lose their faith and hope.
En nuestros propios hogares se pierde el respeto por los padres.
In our own homes, we lose respect for the
Los
parents.
padres pierden el respeto por los hijos.
And parents lose respect for the children.
En su forma de actuar arrastran a los hijos a la falta de fe y a que se vayan al mundo.
And in their own way of acting, parents are dragging their kids away from the faith.
Porque no terminamos de definirnos como lo que somos.
Because we don't end up identifying or defining who we are.
Caminamos en 2 aguas, un rato en la carne y un rato en el espíritu.
And we tend to walk in 2 different waters, sometimes in the flesh, sometimes
Pasamos
in
el
the spirit.
switch y nos arrodillamos y estamos en el espíritu.
And we flip a switch and all of a sudden we're in the spirit.
Y amanecemos con los afanes de la vida y pasamos al switch y carne.
And then we wake up and we flip the switch again and all of a sudden we're in the flesh and we have problems.
Y tengo que hacer esto y aquello y jamás decimos que Dios me acompañe.
And I have to do this thing or that other thing, and we never once say, I hope that God comes with me today.
Ganamos algo, mira lo que me gané, y no dice, Dios me dio esto.
We make a little bit of money and we start saying, well, look what I made and not look what God gave me.
Iniciamos lo que se nos da la gana y es nuestra fuerza y no es porque el Señor nos está ayudando.
And we start whatever project we have and we start saying it's by our own power or whatever, and we don't acknowledge God in any of it.
Peleamos nuestras batallas con nuestra sabiduría y nuestro entendimiento y no invitamos al Señor a ser el dueño de nuestros negocios.
And we start fighting our battles with our own force, with our own power, and we forget to include God in all of it.
Castigamos a nuestros hijos y no consultamos el manual del Señor para saber qué es lo que debemos hacer con ellos.
And we punish our children, and yet we don't go to the Bible to figure out how it's supposed to be done.
Aplicamos nuestra autoridad y dejamos a un lado la misericordia del Señor.
We start applying our own authority and we forget the power of the Word of God.
Y nuestros hijos no tienen dentro de sí el concepto de amar y respetar a papá y a mamá.
And our children grow up without the concept of respecting you as a parent.
Porque se lo hemos enseñado y se lo hemos impuesto, pero no nos lo hemos ganado.
Because we force them and we've imposed ourselves into their lives instead of winning them over into our lives.
Porque se puede ser jefe porque se nombra jefe,
Because you can be a boss because you've been given the title,
pero otra cosa es ganarse el puesto de jefe.
but it's a very different thing when you earn the title of being a boss.
Se puede ser padre y madre porque engendró y porque dio a luz,
And you can have the title of being a mom or a dad because you gave birth, you conceived.
pero muy otra cosa es cuando el hijo llora de gozo cuando ve a su mamá o a su papá.
But it's very different when your child yearns to be by your side because you are their mom or dad.
Muy otra cosa es cuando el papá siente el dolor de ver a su hijo enfermo o ver a su hijo haciendo algo raro.
And it's very different when a father or mother feels pain because their child is sick or they're doing something wrong.
Yo recuerdo una vez que mi padre me encontró a las 2 de la mañana fumando.
I remember one time when my father found me at 2 a.m. and I was smoking.
Me dijo, Nelson, hasta ahí ha llegado tu vicio.
And he asked me, Nelson, is that really where your vice has taken you?
Y yo me quedé mirándolo.
And I just looked at him.
Y él mismo me dijo, ciertamente yo no he sido ejemplo para ti.
And he told me, I have not been an example for
Pero
you.
eso lo ayudó a dejar el vicio.
But that helped him leave his vice of smoking.
Yo peleé muchos años hasta que me quité esa basura de encima.
And I fought many years until finally I let go of that burden.
Hasta que Dios me dio esa fortaleza.
Until God gave me the strength to do so.
Pero pasados 40 años,
But after 40 years,
esa porquería me pasó factura.
that vice ended up producing a
Me
receipt.
apareció el cáncer.
I got cancer.
Y si no es porque Dios me libra, yo estaría muerto.
And if it wasn't because God liberated me from that, I would be dead.
Yo recuerdo cuando mi papá me dijo eso y agachó la cabeza.
I remember when my dad said that and he lowered his head.
A mí me dio dolor con él,
I remember I felt pain,
pero me dio vergüenza conmigo.
but I was more so ashamed as well.
Y hacía más nunca yo volví a fumar en presencia de papá.
And I never smoked in front of him ever again.
Pero no hallaba cómo quitarme esa malicia.
But I had no idea how to let go of the vice
Hasta que el Señor en su misericordia me dio la fuerza.
until God gave me the strength.
Porque clamé a Él y Él me liberó de eso.
Because I called out to him and he answered.
Muchas veces, hermano,
Many times.
tenemos cosas ocultas.
We've got things that we're hiding.
Debemos y creemos que no estamos haciendo nada.
We're drinking a little and we think we're not doing
Nuestros hijos nos
anything.
están mirando.
But our children are watching.
Ellos saben lo que nosotros estamos haciendo.
They know what we're doing.
Y los convertimos en hipócritas y mentirosos porque tienen que callar para protegernos a nosotros.
And we start converting them into hypocrites and liars because then they
Eso
got to
es un
cover for
grave
us.
pecado delante de Dios.
And that is a grave sin before
Porque estamos
God.
conduciendo a nuestros hijos a perdición.
Because we're leading our children to getting lost.
Hasta aquí el mensaje, hermano. Yo no voy a decir más nada.
That's the end of this message. I'm not going to say
Solamente
anything
quiero,
else.
hermano, que pensemos.
I just want us to think.
Jesús fue tan hombre como usted o yo.
Jesus was as much a man as you or
Tan
I.
ser humano como usted o yo.
In other words, he was a human like us.
Con la diferencia que en él no fue hallado pecado.
With the difference that in him was no
Si usted
sin.
revisa,
If you check,
dice una palabra clave.
there was a key word said.
No pudo hacer milagros.
He could not do a single
No
miracle.
creía.
They didn't believe.
Excepto que
Except
sanó a varios
he healed a few
poniendo sus manos sobre ellos.
by placing his hand on them.
Ahí está la diferencia.
That's the difference.
Jesús seguía siendo Jesús.
Jesus was still Jesus.
Para la gente no era nadie.
To the people, he
Para
was
la
no
gente era
one.
un carpintero.
To the people, he was a
No era el
carpenter.
Hijo de Dios,
He wasn't the Son of
pero el
God.
poder fluía de él.
But the power still
Él
flowed.
tenía su vida,
He had
él
his life.
tenía su responsabilidad
He had his
y la guardaba y la cuidaba
And he took care
y
of
la
it.
ministraba.
And he ministered it.
Y eso tiene que ser con nosotros.
And that has to be the same
No
for
importa
us.
lo que el mundo diga,
Doesn't matter what the
es
world
tu
says.
conciencia y mi conciencia delante de Dios.
It's your conscience and my
Es
conscience
nuestra
before God.
comunión con Dios.
It's our
Es
communion with
cómo
God.
estamos llevando nuestra vida.
It's how we're leading our
Es
lives.
qué estamos haciendo con el ministerio que Dios nos dio.
It's what we're doing with the ministry that
¿Qué
God
hay
gave
del
us.
talento que Dios nos entregó?
What about the gift, the
Dios
talent
nos
that God
bendiga.
gave us? God bless
Que
you.
Dios nos bendiga.
God
Nos
bless you.
ponemos de pie, por favor.